A very, very useful article for me, anyway, in the way I try to think about people's lives in South Africa, by Hanli Nordici on News 24. And the headline asks the question, could you live on 30 Rand a day? Now, of course I couldn't. If I had to, I suppose, I don't know that I have the wherewithal to make the adjustments to live on 30 Rand a day that hundreds of thousands, perhaps even millions of South Africans have to make that adjustment and live on that amount of money. The gap between the breadline and a comfortable life in South Africa. And it's written with the upcoming increase, and that's of the 1st of March, in the minimum wage. The minimum wage was instituted in 2019. It was set then at 20 Rand an hour. As of the 1st of March, it will go above 30 Rand for the first time. It'll be 30 Rand and 23 cents. And the story also talks about the different kinds of poverty line. Extreme poverty, defined by Stats SA as South Africans who have less than 30 Rand a day to spend on food. The official food poverty line is 885 Rand a month. That's just under 28 Rand 50 a day, and about 5% more than the 816 Rand last year. So if you look at the number of people who are being paid on an hourly basis, and look at the number of people, and these are all numbers which are in the article and which are obtained from Stats SA, there's a large number who work on an hourly wage, but a very large percentage of those don't work 8 hours a day, 5 days a week. And it just again points to the enormous difficulty that so many millions of South Africans, whether they are employed or not, have in feeding themselves. And if you're getting the minimum wage, then theoretically you've got enough to feed yourself and a couple of members in your family. But then you can't afford to travel to work. You can't afford to do anything other than spend every cent you get on food. Professor Ines Meyer joins us now, chairperson of the Living Wage SA organization and a professor at UCT School of Management. Ines, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, John.
We need to have these numbers not rammed down our throat, because if you try to ram numbers and their implications down our throat, we'll turn away from them. But we need to be constantly told about the way that so many of us live.
Yes, fully. And I'm glad that you mentioned the numbers, not being shoved down our throats, because this is what, as the Living Wage South Africa network, we also say it's not about the number per se, but it's about thinking what it does to people if they work and their income is through this work is so low that we basically can't get by. And many of us are employed, but are also employers ourselves of domestic workers, of gardeners, for example. And we often don't think, what does it actually mean if we pay someone whatever hourly wage or monthly wage we pay? And so it really is about, what does it mean if I am paying someone a certain amount? What does it mean for their life? And what does it actually mean to what am I doing to that person?
Look, I think the only long-term solution to this is much more vibrant economic growth than we've had and that we are likely to have in the foreseeable future, because only then does the demand-supply equation for labour get to the point where 30 Rand 23 is not going to be enough to get you somebody to do even the most basic of tasks. But with the world of work changing the way that it is, and so many jobs now potentially being done not by human beings who prepare to work for 30 Rand and 23 cents an hour, but by something else, is there a solution in sight to this vast cohort of unpaid or overpaid South Africans, unpaid or underpaid South Africans?
Yes, I think it is not going to be easy, as you said, not in this economic climate we find ourselves, but I don't think economic growth per se is the solution to everything. And also we don't need to wait for more economic growth to get to that solution, because while it is true for many that there's just no way to increase wages. There's also many who we could be paying more. If you just looked at wages differently. So, for example, we're looking at pay scales. And a big argument is that, but if we increase the minimum wages, then we also need to increase everyone else's wages. But why? If you look at when these pay scales and pay grades were developed, that system was developed. It was in the 1950s, 1960s, not in South Africa. So the world was a very different place in those times. And so maybe it is time to look at a different system of how pay is determined. And one could, for example, say, at a minimum, it is important, if I'm employing someone, that that person can live a very humble but decent life. And below that, it is just not possible to go. And at the moment, the minimum wage does not count for that, and the amount is lower than that. And I think that is important. It shouldn't be legislated. That amount shouldn't be legislated because really not everyone can afford to pay it. But we could start thinking about, if I can't afford to pay this now, what can I put in place to move there in future? And there is a reverse argument that says, if we pay people more, that will have a trickle effect onto the economy. So it's what is the chicken and what is the egg? So it could also be that by paying people adequately, if we can stimulate the economy, because then there's more money available to flow back into the economy.
Because at a small business, medium-sized business level, people are going to say, if I pay 50% more than I'm paying at the moment, I'll go out of business. So what I'm paying is literally all that my business can afford to pay. And that might be true in some cases. It's probably untrue in other cases because, how much do you give to yourself for having had the idea for the business and putting in the work to set up the business and employ the people and all of the stuff that goes with employing a person or several persons or scores of people. And at the level of the household employer who employs a gardener or a domestic worker, that's the same argument. Some say, okay, I can't afford to pay X amount for a week, so I'm going to employ only 2 days a week or 1 day a week and hope that that person gets work at a similar rate to what I'm paying for the 3 days of the week that they're not employed by me. But these all seem like such, candy floss kind of solutions. They disappear like mist in your hands.
Yes, unfortunately so. But we're going to change society if we ourselves contribute to changing society. And those who don't want to pay an amount that allows another person to live, they're going to find loopholes, even if the legislation says in much higher wage even than 30 Rand an hour. There will always be people who find loopholes if they want to. And you correctly said, there are employers who cannot afford this amount. But there, again, it would be important to say, but what can I do? What is my plan to get there that in future I can support individuals at an amount that is adequate for them to live? And sometimes there are other things that can be put into place. Leftover food, for example, which is not ideal, but it could be a starting point. And I think we might underestimate that many South Africans really want to work towards improving society, but it's not in our minds because we don't even think that we have an opportunity to change in the way that we pay our domestic worker, our gardener, or the people that are in our employ.
Professor Ines Meyer, thank you, chairperson of the Living Wage South Africa Network and a professor at UCT School of Management Studies.